listener production.
Hey, welcome to part 2 of the Briefing's special 3-part series on artificial intelligence and your job. I'm Bension Siebert. On this episode, if you can't beat them, join them? Yesterday we heard from prolific Australian voice actor Thomas G. Burt on how AI all but destroyed his career.
That really was a bit of a turning point for me going, okay, I think in the long term and even in the immediate short term, the industry's screwed. It's so much cheaper to get machines to do this job. And how much do people care? That's the real thing.
Today,
I'm personally not worried about a computer taking my job.
we hear from top Australian doctors about why they think they'll be safe from any AI unemployment tsunami, even if they admit the technology might be better at some things than they are.
You know, large language models are really good at expressing themselves. And there are studies showing that when they explain things to patients, they're often perceived as being, easier to deal with. Their language and explanations are favoured by patients.
Later in this episode, you'll hear from a GP and tech expert on how doctors are dealing with the safety implications of using these systems at your local clinic. First, John Slobodnak is the president of the College of Australian and New Zealand Radiologists. John, welcome to the briefing.
Thank you.
For most of us, AI sort of burst onto the scene when ChatGPT released an iteration in 2022, but artificial intelligence has been around for much longer than that. When did it sort of first clock to you that AI might start to be something relevant to your field?
So AI, as you said, has been around for a very long time, probably over 50 years, and it's been through ups and downs. But to me, really started to come across my radar in around 2016. For example, there was a very famous statement by someone called Geoffrey Hinton, who recently got a Nobel Prize for his work in AI late last year.
I think if you work as a radiologist, you're like the coyote that's already over the edge of the cliff, but hasn't yet looked down, so doesn't realise there's no ground underneath him. People should stop training radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that within 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists because it's going to be able to get a lot more experience.
So that was sort of a landmark statement. Probably illustrates that if you make comments outside your area of expertise, you're at greater risk. And this was a highly intelligent man, as his recent Nobel Prize suggests. So that brought it to my attention.
Was that a bit of a moment of panic for you and other colleagues in the field when someone so high up in artificial intelligence is basically telling you that your job won't exist in 5 years?
So I don't know panic because I've seen so many different technologies arrive in radiology over my 33-odd year career, and they often take quite a bit of time to settle. So I had that history and knowledge that, okay, this is important. We need to grasp the opportunity, be involved, try to make sure it's done in a way that's safe for patients. So we started doing a number of things from 2016 onwards to work in that direction.
You are someone who's very across the evidence in this field, and it has been a very mixed picture. So in 2020, researchers found that AI could outperform radiologists in mammogram screenings. 2023, there was an article showing that radiologists outperformed AI when it comes to spotting lung disease. And then doctors in general, there was a small study in just 2024 that found ChatGPT outdid human physicians when assessing medical case histories, even when those doctors were using ChatGPT, as in ChatGPT by itself was better than doctor by themselves or doctor using ChatGPT. Has this been a bit of a roller coaster for you?
Firstly, yes, enormous variability in the sort of results we're seeing. And having been in research myself for a significant part of my career, it's often in the detail. So where you find that doctors using ChatGPT didn't do very well, you need to know how they did the study. Had these doctors been trained in using it? Did they know how to use it well? If they were relative novices, then that might explain it. So I think it would be generally true to say that the research proving the benefits of AI in general is not perhaps of the quality one might hope to use very widely. But then, to the other point, large language models are really good at expressing themselves. And there are studies showing that when they explain things to patients, they're often perceived as being, easier to deal with. Their language and explanations are favoured by patients. So that it really is a horses for courses situation, and that's why this situation right now that we're sitting in is patchy. We need to be careful, precise and specific about what we do and when we do it, and base it on the evidence.
So if you're not waiting on results from an X-ray or another scan, you're just seeing your local GP, are they already using AI in their work? And if so, what are they doing to make sure it's safe? Dr. David Adam is a Perth-based GP, former IT administrator and a member of the Expert Committee on Technology for the Royal Australian College of GPs.
The most common thing you'll come across in practices, in consulting rooms, in hospitals across the country is in the use of what we call an AI scribe. So that's a piece of software that records the consultation and then turns that into the consultation notes that we would normally write. So every time you go and see a doctor, they're going to write some notes about what you've said, what they've found, and what the plan is going to be, what you've agreed on. And I guess it's similar to the sorts of things you'll see in, your meeting software, which offers to automatically summarise the consultation or summarise the meeting. I know doctors certainly find that the documentation side of things can be pretty wearing at times, just like if you've been in a big meeting and then you've got to sit down and write the notes afterwards. So the software is designed to try and improve that process a bit.
Do you use it in your own practice?
I don't personally, although I have tried it, and it's not for me. But I would say about a third of my colleagues in our reasonably large practice use it on a daily basis, and most of us have tried it and given it a go.
We here at The Briefing use transcribing software when we're making our episodes, so I have quite a bit of experience with it. And one thing I can say is that it's not always particularly exactly accurate. Is this safe in a clinical setting?
Look, it's a good question. And certainly in the States, there was a slightly alarming article about people without prostates being described as having prostate problems or, similar sorts of things. I think you're right. I think the transcription and the summarization is not perfect. And the companies that make these software are always very clear that it's still the clinician's responsibility at the end of the day to be sure that what goes in the record is correct. I personally find that, editing something that someone else has written is probably harder than writing yourself. And I think that was my experience with this, was that it didn't really kind of say it the way I would have said it. And so turning that into something that I would use was quite time consuming. There are definitely some of my patients who are very concerned about the intrusion of this sort of thing into what they feel is a private consultation. And I think there really is for me anyway, there's a process of thinking and of synthesis and putting things together that go into generating the documentation, which is why I don't use one of these tools personally.
On the other hand, this technology is getting better on sort of an exponential speed, and there is this whole idea of an AI jobs apocalypse, that if we don't get our heads around this stuff, then we will be automated out of existence. Is that a worry for doctors?
I'm personally not worried about a computer taking my job. I think most of my job is about establishing a good relationship with a patient, understanding their concerns and being able to give them advice that's tailored to them. And AIs can do pretty impressive work, but I don't think that relationship can really be replaced by a virtual assistant. Now, some people might say that's naive, but most medicine is done in people who don't have simple problems. And so it's often not well understood by people who aren't going to the doctor with complicated things all the time.
Do you think that it's wise for people in your profession, and I guess others, to just be across and experiment with the use of AI in their jobs in order to make sure that there isn't some bot that can do your job or mine in 5 years?
People sometimes see GPs as sort of, stuck in the past or slow to adopt these things. But I think GPs are very keen to see how we can make our jobs easier and make our patients' lives better. One thing that is always very clear to me is that there is a responsibility and a degree of accountability that an individual professional takes when they are taking care of someone that large software companies are very keen to avoid being saddled with the responsibility for. So, even in the trial software, which will do things like assist with diagnosis, it's always made extremely clear that the final responsibility is the physician's, and it's my insurance, not theirs, that is on the line. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think that degree of accountability is really important, and patients and the public and other doctors, all appreciate that. We all want to know that it's not just care, but responsibility.
Radiologist John Slowotnek again.
So AI is already working in terms of image processing, enhancing the quality of information that radiologists see. And after that, the radiologist has to look at the imaging. So, for example, there's a very common program that is being used in many sites in Australia to look at chest x-rays, and it looks for certain findings. It marks spots on the image where it thinks there may be an abnormality. It acts as like a second pair of eyes for the radiologist. What it doesn't really understand or do is medicine in general, remembering radiologists have initially trained as doctors before they do specialty training, so they can see the patient situation and they can see the image and put the two together to integrate that information and give a better opinion than just, I think there's a dot in that position, which is what AI is doing at the moment. Looking into the future, however, if we get to the point where an AI can pull information from the patient's medical record, from the lab tests, from the images themselves, maybe even wearables that the patient has on, then you can start to integrate a whole lot of information and provide a very expert opinion, hopefully evidence-based, to improve patient care. That's well down the track, but it's certainly an exciting future development that a lot of people in this field are talking about.
Is there any stage in that process that conceptually could not be performed by an artificial intelligence in the future? Is there anything in there that must be performed by a human?
I guess it comes ultimately right back to the question of, can you do what goes on in our brains in silico or with some external material? If we believe our thinking, our cognitive activity is something that can be simulated just as well on a computer, then the answer in principle is no. There's nothing we couldn't do with enough computational power and understanding. That's an unproven position. But I think AI will certainly take on a huge number of roles of a wide variety of professions, radiologists, other doctors, lawyers, etc., etc. I may be, if I live long enough, I may have a podcast with an AI at some point in future. Anyway, that's speculation.
Deep cuts.
Yeah.
If in concept there's nothing stopping a sufficiently advanced artificial intelligence from doing each of those steps, is it such a bad thing? Could that democratize healthcare, meaning that someone in any part of the world could potentially get the benefits of radiology without having to spend very much money on it?
For example, Africa, underprivileged, limited resources, no radiologists available in many cases. Well, AI, although imperfect at the moment, it's better to have had something. It'll still make mistakes, but probably the net benefit to the patient is there in that situation. In modern Western healthcare systems, we're very lucky in Australia and New Zealand to have excellent healthcare compared to even other OECD countries. The bar is a lot higher, so AI is going to have to perform a lot better. But by the time you can do that, you'll be able to do virtually any of the jobs that humans do. So perhaps a bit scary in some ways. In terms of whether that happens, I think it's about patients and the community. What do they want? Do they trust this? Do they feel comfortable with that? That may be a whole evolution over time. So I'm not the one to answer that. I think that's, governments and the population, the people deciding what's right in the future.
John Slivotnek, President of the Royal College of Australian and New Zealand Radiologists, speaking with me there. Before that, you heard GP David Adams. This has been part 2 of our special series on AI and jobs in Australia. In part 3, we explain what you can do to protect your career and what anyone else is doing to help you. If you found this episode interesting, why not share a link with a friend or on your socials? It's a really easy way you can support us and all we do here at The Briefing. You can also always get a whole lot of exclusive video content from us at our Instagram, at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. I'm Benzion Siebert. Catch you next time.